I don't have a kendo sword, otherwise I'd pull it out. But for this video is going to be about Cody Hida, next Digimon, next DigiDestined discussion video. And the reason I say kendo stick or kendo sword or stick is because Cody practices kendo, mostly with his grandfather, but I'm sure he's been in competitions. So this video is going to be about Cody Hida, obviously. He's the youngest of the second generation of the DigiDestined from Adventure. He has the Digi-Eggs of Knowledge and Reliability. Hence why I got my Izzy shirt and my Joe shirt out. His Digimon is, well, its main form is Armadilomon, but its baby form is Subumon. And then Upamon is the in-training form. Armadilomon is the rookie form. And Kilomon is the champion form. And then when Ankylomon DNA digivolves with Angemon, we get Shakuamon, who I went over a bit in TK's video, but I'll go over some more in this video. And then, of course, his Digi-Eggs are the Digi-Egg of Knowledge, which allows him to have Digimon, and the Digi-Egg of Reliability, which gives him Submarimon. So, those are the basic stats for Cody. The bit that we know about him in regards to his past, in 1999, in that summer, Cody's father was killed on duty in London. Cody's father was a police officer, and he traveled with his mother and grandfather to London to bring his father's remains back to Japan. It's never stated why his grandfather or why his father was in London beyond the fact that he was an on-duty officer. So I'm going to assume that his father had been maybe on a case or something, or had been there for a certain thing or whatever. I don't think we ever did an exact explanation as to why he was there. Although I will be going over some more about Cody's father later in this video and possibly in another video, because he has a connection to some other characters that will get kind of talked about a bit in this video. And on the way back, on their return plane home, that was when the battle with Venomyotismon happened, when the original Digidestined are fighting Venomyotismon. And their plane gets attacked by a Kawagamon. And then Megukabuterimon and Megukabuterimon and Garudamon then save the plane so it doesn't crash, and they get it to land safely in the harbor. On that day, that was when Cody had his first contact with Digimon, and he was still quite young at the time. We see, I showed this in the How Do You Become a Digidestined video, but we see him and his grandfather and his mother there, and such, and all the passengers on the plane are perfectly safe and perfectly fine. And that's when, that's when that contact happened, and then several years later is when he becomes a Digidestined. Later on, him and his family end up moving into the same building where Yoli lives, and then later on again is when TK moves into that same building, so the three of them all live in the same building. TK, or Cody and Yoli seem to be quite good friends by the time TK meets them. And by the time 2002 rolls around in the Digimon timeline, on the first day of school, Cody meets TK and they all walk to school together, and then he ends up getting a Digivice that pops out of the computer, because this corresponds when Tai goes to the digital world, and then him and Yoli and Davis all get new Digivices that just pop out of the computer. I don't know if I went over this in anything. Davis's is blue, Yoli's is red, and Cody's is yellow. So we got three primary colors there. And he, he doesn't go to the digital world the first time. That's just Davis with TK and Kari to go help Matt, or go help Tai. And then when they come back, then they're like, oh, well, maybe we can go back to the digital world tomorrow. And then that's when Cody goes with them and Yoli goes with them. I went over this a bit in Yoli's video as well. Izzy and Sora go with them. And they end up finding a temple. And he ends up they end up finding a temple, and they come across the Digi-Eggs of Love and Knowledge. Sora tries to pick up the Digi-Egg of Love, doesn't work. Izzy tries to pick up the Digi-Egg of Knowledge, does not work. So Yoli tries the Digi-Egg of Love, and she gets it, and then Izzy has Cody try to pick up the Digi-Egg of Knowledge, and it works. He's able to pick it up easily, and then out pops Armadilomon. I like Armadilomon. He's a little bit of a foil to Cody, the kind of the same way that Gomamon was to Ken in the original series, or was to Joe in the original series, where he, Cody is very serious by the book type of a thing, not as overly irrational sometimes as Joe, or not as easily panicked as Joe, but Armadilomon is a bit more laid back, the same way that like Gomamon is. So we get that, so that's kind of funny. And they digivolve for the first time after Izzy kind of helps Cody understand the fact that, yeah, the digital world can be scary, but there's a lot of things that make it worth it, because you get to have your Digimon partner, and you'll have all this other stuff that you have to do, you'll have all these friends, and you'll have these Digimon friends, and you'll have your human friend, the other Digidestined, of course, and you can protect people, you can protect the Digimon and such. And Izzy's also Izzy also tells Cody, and if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, you can always come and talk to me, because I had a lot of questions too. So I like what they do there. And then Cody digivolves his digivolves Armadilomon into Digimon for the first time, and then they help against the Digimon Emperor. We get several other times throughout the series where Cody has a few issues that he has to deal with. One of them is his grandfather. A little later, Cody begins to fear that he is letting the team down. But his grandfather assures him that, it's fine. You're trying your hardest, and that's fine. And, he won't, as long as Cody is trying his hardest and trying his best, he won't let anyone down. Cody's grandfather is quite wise. He's his father's father. And he lives with him and Cody's mother. And they seem to get along quite well. I'll go over Izzy's mother and grandfather a little bit more later when I get to the family section, but his grandfather is quite wise. And he always is very good at encouraging Cody. Cody, of course, has some interactions with Joe throughout this time as well. In the episode when Joe comes to the digital world for the first time for them to help Gomamon, he and Cody ends up kind of almost drowning in ice, and Joe has him set aside, Joe, has a fire built and everything to help keep Cody warm, and he stays with Cody to help protect Cody. Because he's not in quite the right condition to fight, because, he got dunked in cold, icy water in a, snowy region. But Cody helps, Joe and Cody kind of bond over that. And then later, is when they have Cody and the others become trapped on the offshore oil platform. I went over this in a few other ones, but they get caught there, and they're trapped by a control spy, or a dark spiraled, Megaseedramon. So he's causing them problems. And he keeps attacking the oil rig, and they're kind of trapped in the oil rig, and they can't get out. They went to the oil rig because they kept getting a signal of there's another Digi-Egg there. So it's another like armored Digi-Egg. And the two girls, Kari and Yoli, work to get Cody out of there, because Cody's kind of having the hardest time being there. And they're like, okay, well, we need to get Cody out of here. So they come up with like you draw straws, and whoever, draws the right straw is the one that goes. And, they get Cody to do it, and he gets angry because they had rigged the game and made him pick first, or had rigged it and made him pick first, so he would always end up with the one with the, the correct straw to get, to be sent away. And they kind of force him into this, escape pod, and they send him off and say, go find Joe. And they send Cody off, and he gets to the surface, and he gets his way back to the real world. He does not have Armadilomon with him because the escape pod was not big enough for him and Armadilomon. Although, admittedly, if like Armadilomon like shrank down to his, his Upamon size, he probably could have fit in there just fine with Cody. But Cody goes back to the real world, and he's trying to find Joe. Because Joe is, of course, the one out of the original Digidestin that has a kind of water-based Digimon that would be able to be very helpful to them. Because he knows the seas and he knows how to find where he's going and everything. And he goes to where Joe is taking I think Joe is taking a biology test. It's a very important test for Joe because, of course, Joe is still studying his doctor at this point in time. Squeaky chair. And Cody had interacted with his grandpa, and Cody's grandfather is also like, well, it's not, lying is wrong. It's not a good idea to lie. You could get twisted into the lie, and you don't know where the lie ends. And Cody kind of takes that to heart, because he takes a lot of things that his grandfather says to him to heart, because Cody doesn't remember his father very much, and his grandfather is like the closest thing that he has to him. I mean, like, I guess, like, Joe and Izzy could kind of take the spots as, like, older brothers or something like that to Cody, kind of the same way that, like, Mimi and Sora kind of take kind of the older sister slots for, Yoli. I mean, Davis has his older sister. He has June, but he's not the biggest fan of June. And I guess he kind of has, like, Ty and Matt that he can look up to. But Cody, in his own family, he has his grandfather and his mom. And so he takes things that his grandfather and his mom tell him very, very seriously. And, Cody gets to where Joe is taking his test, and it's a very important test. And, like, he's trying to tell the person, it's like, well, I really need to get Joe, and I really need him to come out here because I really need him for something. And they're like, well, the only way that we could let him out is if there's, like, an emergency or something like that. And then Cody lies. Cody doesn't like lying, but he lies, and he says, well, there is an emergency and people are in danger and someone could be dying because, it's like they're running out of oxygen in the digital world. And this is one of the times when I would assume that, like, the real world and the digital world, like, their times are synced. Like, the same amount of time that you're in the digital world equals the same amount of time that you were gone in the real world. Or vice versa. Because, like, when night hits in the digital world, that's when night hits in the real world. And, Joe and, Izzy, Cody lies and says, Joe's grandfather is, like, having a heart attack or something like that. And they get, Joe comes out of the test and him and Cody are there. And, Cody is like, I'm sorry I lied. Your grandfather's fine, but the others are in danger in the digital world and we need you and Gomamon and such. And Joe's like, okay, well, that's fine. And he calls Izzy and he tells Izzy, okay, I need you to find me Gomamon and I need you to find an old friend. And this is when they go back to the digital world, and the rest of the Digidestin had spent the time on the oil rig trying to dig through, like the floor of the oil rig, and they find the Digi Egg of Reliability. They each try to lift it. They cannot lift it. None of them is worthy of it. And then, Joe shows up with, Cody shows up and he's got Joe, and they're, being carried by Waymon. And, Waymon gets in there, and, like, Yukakumon's out there, and he's fighting against Megaseedramon, trying to, get to the, the dark spiral that's on his tail so they can free him from the Digimon Emperor's control. And Joe and Cody get inside, and, like, it refreshes all of the air inside. The part of the platform they were in was underwater, so at one point there's, like, water coming in. But they had, like, I guess, because oil rigs, I guess in the digital world, oil rigs are designed to have, like, these platforms that'll close over the top of it to, like, prevent the water from filling up. It does block off the air, but, prevents it from filling up with water. So you have longer time to be rescued. And Joe looks at the Digi Egg of Reliability, and he tells Cody that he assures him that it's okay sometimes to tell a white lie to save your friends. That doesn't mean that you're dishonest or unreliable or anything like that. It means that you were reliable in that moment. And there is a huge difference between the white lie that can save someone's life and the horrible, mean, twisted lies that can hurt people. And that kind of helps Cody. And Joe manages to convince Cody to try to pick up the Digi-Egg, and he's able to pick up the Digi-Egg of Reliability perfectly fine. And he activates it, and this allows Armadilomon to Digivolve into Submarimon. And Submarimon is basically, he's a submarine combined with a Digimon, and that's fun. And he, Cody can ride in the back of him, can ride inside of him, and communicate with him and everything. And they go out and they help Submarimon, or they help Ikakumon fight against Megaseedramon. They are able to stop Megaseedramon, and they're able to free him from the control, the Dark Spiral, and he thanks them for that. I'm assuming this is a Megaseedramon that does not have a grudge against the Digidestined, because we see multiple Megaseedramon throughout the series, throughout the first 2 series. There's the Metal Seedramon that was the Dark Master, and then there's like the Seedramon that they encounter in like the 3rd episode that Matt fights, and then there's like other ones that pop up. So I'm assuming this one is okay with them. And then Cody also, via Submarimon starts showing him all this, the beauty of, the underwater of the, the ocean, because Cody's kind of scared of the ocean. I don't know, I don't remember if they ever said exactly why he's scared of the ocean, but he kind of is. But Submarimon kind of helps him get over that fear. And for the rest of the series, for the rest of the season, whenever Cody has to ride in Submarimon, he's fine with it. And then they end up, then from that way, then they have, they find out, of course, in that time frame, they found out that Ken is the Digimon Emperor. They deal with the whole, having to deal with, Ken creating Chimeramon. And one of the things that happens is when Ken creates Chimeramon, Cody is there, and he sees what happens to TK when he sees Devimon for the first time in, so many years since he was a kid. And Cody sees this, and it really kind of throws Cody off. And Cody goes and he talks to Matt at one point. I don't remember if this is exactly at that same time frame or if this is later on in the series, in the season, but he does go and talk to Matt at one point about, like, why does TK have such a hatred for the darkness? Why does that set him off when TK is, Cody and the others are so used to seeing TK very carefree and friendly and everything, but this just kind of sets him off. And Cody is curious about this, and Matt explains about Devimon and how he had destroyed Patamon when they first, the first time when they were in the digital world, how, TK is the only one of them so far that has actually watched their Digimon die and had to, feel that pain of losing them, but, before they knew that they would get them back. I mean, even with the whole concept of, like, with Digimon, where it's like, oh yeah, the Digimon die and everything, but they can get reborn at Primary Village, and their data can be reformed, and, they can still have their old memories and everything, but they get they get another chance. It still hurts because you still had to watch your Digimon die. We see this with, like, TK didn't know it at the time when he was a kid, but we still see that there. And, like, Cody even says, I don't know what that would have been like to watch, to watch Armadilomon get destroyed in front of me. Because that's part of what it does with Digidestined, is that you build this bond with your Digimon quite quickly, actually. For the short amount of time that you're kind of around them in the beginning of the series or at the beginning of your adventure, you build that bond rather quickly. And, so what ends up happening is, of course, Cody is there at the anniversary bit where they all meet up for the anniversary of when they fought Myotismon, and he's there and he witnesses Kari and Gatomon seeing Wizardmon, and kind of hears some more about, like, the older kids when they were in the digital world and everything. And then Cody is, of course, there during the battle against Chimeramon with Magnamon, and Cody is there and he watches as, Ken loses everything and loses Wormmon in his arms and everything. And I'll go over a bit more elaborated of, like, what goes on with Ken when I get to Ken's video, which will be the next video. But or the next Digimon discussion video for the characters for the kids. But Cody watches along with the rest of the Digidestined, and it is heartbreaking to watch. And Cody even thinks that it's heartbreaking. And Cody is actually the one that holds the grudge against Ken the longest. But what ends up happening is, of course, after they defeat Ken and everything, then, in the real world, that, Cody and Davis and Yoli kind of go on vacation, and then they go to America to help TK and Kari deal with Willis and Kokomon and Terriermon and all of that, and they go to Colorado, and Cody is there for all of that battle. And, so we get, more, fun things with Cody there for the movie. And then we cut back to the digital world. And what ends up happening is, Cody and the rest of the group are, of course, helping with, rebuilding the digital world. And throughout the course of this, each of the younger Digidestined, Davis and Yoli and Cody, each have their Digimon Digivolve to the champion level for the first time. For Davis, it has to deal with going up against, I think it's Terriermon with Vmon, so he gets X Vmon. And with Cody, what ends up happening is they're rebuilding this village, and Cody and Armadilomon are working on the village, and there's a control spire there. Usually they're pretty good about destroying the control spires. The control spire was there, and then the control spire vanished. And then they end up getting attacked by this little Digimon called, I think it's called Thundermon. And it attacks Cody and Armadilomon. And then Armadilomon ends up Digivolving into Ankylomon for the first time. And protecting Cody. But then at that same time, Ken shows up with Stingmon. And Stingmon destroys Thundermon. And for the Digidestined, for the rest of the younger kids, they're looking at this, and even Kari and TK are like, what just happened? Because, well, it's not necessarily a surprise to see that, like, Stingmon came back to Stingmon, and then they see Stingmon, like, de-digivolve into Wormmon, and then him and Ken disappear. But they're like, how did Ken just killed that Digimon in, like, I guess cold blood, quote unquote, even though there was a battle and it attacked Cody. They're like, Ken just killed that Digimon. And it throws all of them for a loop. And Cody just gets very angry about it. He's like, he killed that innocent Digimon. And then they find out about the Control Spire Digimon. They find out about Arukenimon and Mummymon, and that Arukenimon has been using the Control Spires to make these fake Digimon to make them, go and destroy something. And Cody does kind of relent that, okay, so the Thundermon that attacked me was, was a Control Spire Digimon, so I guess Ken did kind of save me in that regard, but it's still, Cody's the one that takes the longest to forgive Ken. Davis is the first, Kari is kind of the second out of the main group, Mimi is like the first one out of the original Digidestined to like forgive Ken, because he helps kind of protect her and Palmon at one point. And the rest of the Digidestined, Yoli forgives Ken, and then so does TK and Kari. And Cody is the last one out of the group, out of the younger kids, to forgive Ken. But the first time where we kind of have to see where Cody and Ken have to kind of work together, and where we see Cody has to start understanding the fact of, Ken is trying to redeem himself. Cody's there and witnesses when Davis and Ken DNA Digivolve their Digimon for the first time, and where Pyildramon comes into play when they're fighting against Okuamon at Ken's old base that's about to blow up, and he watches as Ken is willing to go into the base and like stop it himself and everything. But then we get to the giant bug house, where Arkenimon's there, and she lures the kids into this trap with this giant house full of bug Digimon that she can use her, her flute to hypnotize and control the bug-type Pokemon. This, of course, results in Stingmon and Digimon getting controlled. And because the Digidestined, because Davis doesn't want to have Vmon hurt the two of them, he's like defending against them, but he doesn't really want to hurt them because, of course, they're his friends. And it's not like he can just aim for like a Control Spire or for a Dark Ring or something like that and destroy it. They have to stop Arukenimon. And what ends up happening is Davis and Cody and Ken all end up having to be together during this time frame. They get separated from the rest of the group and they're together. They get caught on this giant spider web, and then Cody and Ken do have, Cody has to kind of try to work with Ken to try to get them out of the spider's web. And it does, I don't remember if Cody actually does it, but he like hesitates a little bit. But they do end up eventually, getting out of that, and then they end up getting into like a safer spot for a little while. But Stingmon and Digimon are still trying to attack them. Admittedly, can't you just de-digivolve your Digimon? Can't you just like, make Digimon de-digivolve into Armadilomon, and then he's not going to be attacking you anymore because he's not a bug Digimon anymore? I mean, like, the Stingmon's a little bit different, but still. But, like, they do that, and then, like, during that time frame is when, like, Yoli and CK and Kari are dealing with, like, making the music on the editing software to mess with Arukenimon's flute, and it works, and they stop her. And then they all work together, and then still, Cody, again, still has the hardest time. He can't find it in his heart to forgive Ken. And at one point, on the episode when Blackboard Greymon comes into existence, the group had all been, working on destroying a bunch of control spires, and Ken has been helping the group and everything with destroying the control spires. And they end up, Davis and Vmon kind of try to get Cody and Ken to kind of work together to destroy a really big control spire. And Vmon and Ankylamon worked together really well to destroy it. And so that worked. And those two kind of got, finally got to be, friends, and they're happy. But Ken and Cody still don't like, still won't, work with each other. And they, Ken and Wormmon leave, and they kind of, go off. And this is when like the Blackboard Greymon starts happening. This is when Yoli goes off and finds Ken when she slapped him, and brings him back. But throughout the little bit more of the series, with dealing with Blackboard Greymon and some other things, Cody does eventually forgive Ken. He does eventually, finally forgive him. And he's, he's willing to work with Ken for the sake of the team, but he eventually does forgive Ken. And he slowly begins to understand Ken better. And what ends up happening is, Paildramon comes into existence, of course, between Ken and Davis. And then, Sylphimon we get between Kari and Yoli. And then that means that Cody realizes that TK will be his DNA digivolving partner. And he's fine with that, but this is, I think, when Cody goes and talks to Matt, and where they talk about, Devimon and TK's history with, darkness and everything. And this is when Blackboard Greymon is going around and, like, destroying all the Destiny Stones and everything. And they find, at one point, Cody literally, like, stands up against Blackboard Greymon. He, like, faces off against him, like, stands up directly to him. And it kind of throws Blackboard Greymon off a bit. Blackboard Greymon will get his own video. When it's like the Digimon Friends videos that I'm doing, he will get his own one. But so, TK and Cody do end up getting to being able to DNA digivolve when they find the last Destiny Stone, and they meet Azulongmon. TK and Cody were able to finally DNA digivolve Ankylamon and Angemon into Shakuamon. I kind of like Shakuamon. It's not my favorite out of the 3 DNA digivolving Digimon that we get for this one, but, I still don't mind it. I really wish that they would do more, like, if they had done something else where they did, like, DNA digivolving between, like, Izzy and, Joe, that would have been interesting, or between, like, Mimi and Sora, because they have, Matt and Ty that DNA digivolve together for Omnimon. Seeing the other ones kind of being able to DNA digivolve would be kind of interesting to watch. But Cody and TK are finally able to, connect, and that's when they get Shakumon. And then we cut to December for Christmas, and what ends up happening is Cody has finally forgiven Ken, and Ken throws his Christmas party, and he gives the invitations to the rest of them, and then we get this inner monologue between the two of them, where in the episode Ken goes over to give Cody his invitation, and he's like, time to go give Cody the invitation. I'm pretty sure he still hates me. And then we have Cody's inner monologue of, here comes Ken. He's probably not going to give me an invitation because he still hates me. And then they're both thrown for a loop because Ken hands Cody an invitation to the party, and he takes it, and he's like, I'll be there. And then Ken's just kind of thrown off by it. But it's just nice to see them finally, getting along. And of course, Cody goes to the Christmas party with the rest of the group, so that's just kind of cute there. And then, of course, we have to deal with the Digimon World Tour. And Cody gets paired up with Joe for this, and they end up going to Australia, where they meet a young Digidestin there that has a Crabmon. I do not remember what the kid's name is off the top of my head. But we have Cody and Joe are there. And at one point, I remember that their Digimon, Ikakumon and Ankylomon, or Submarimon, I think at one point, worked together with Crabmon, who is the kids, the Australian Digidestin's Digimon, against a bunch of these other sea-type Digimon, water-type Digimon. And they start taunting them with turning them into different food, which I just find hilarious. So they're able to, destroy the control spire and send the Digimon back to the digital world, and then they head back to Japan. And when they get back to Japan, they of course learn about, the fact that Arukenimon and Mummymon have ended up kidnapping all of these children, and then they want Ken, and then they kind of kidnap Ken, and then this is when the group are running around the city trying to, save the kids and save Ken, and this is also when they are attacked by the Daemon Cores, or the Daemon Core. And Daemon is an extremely powerful evil Digimon. I think he's, I want to say he's either Mega or Ultimate level. He's the highest level, and he's an extremely powerful evil Digimon. And what ends up happening is his cores, Cody, or Yoli and Kari end up fighting against Lady Devimon, and TK and Cody with Shakumon have to end up battling against Marine Devimon. He's actually kind of a cool looking design. And this is when Cody has to deal with the fact that, yes, sometimes you do have to kill Digimon that are evil for the sake of being evil. They're not under the control of someone. They're not a control spire Digimon. They're not something that can be reasoned with. They are just evil for the sake of being evil. And Marine Devimon ends up attacking this hospital, and TK and Cody have to help this girl in a wheelchair, get her to safety, and Shakumon's only option is to destroy Marine Devimon, which he does. And, Cody kind of has to accept that was kind of the only option. But he's still upset and shocked that, he had to, having to take part in killing a living being, which is kind of a hard thing for Cody to accept, but he kind of eventually does, get to that point where he can accept it, that it's in this case, you had to do it, Shakumon had to do it to protect you. The data may still get reborn, but, we had to do it in the first place, because if they didn't, then Marine Devimon would have probably killed you and TK and killed the girl. And I don't remember if it's ever been stated what exactly happens to a Digimon when their Digidestin dies. Or at least not in this series. I think in a different series we maybe get a hint of what happens. But in the case of this series, I don't know if we ever get an exact answer, because it's we've seen Digimon die, because we see, Patamon die, Angemon die in the original series. We see Wormmon die in the second series, and in the second season. And, yeah, it hurts to watch, of course, but they'll get reborn. But the thing is that with the humans, I don't know if we've seen it where, the human dies, and what happens to the Digimon. I would assume that if the human dies, the Digimon may still go on, but there's this, there's this missing piece inside of them. But it may also be the thing of, if the Digidestin dies, the Digimon, may not, or the Diginon may die, but I don't know. They deal with that, and then several days later, Cody is talking to his grandfather, and then his grandfather discovers Armadilomon. And his grandfather then explains that Cody's father, Hiroki, had a fascination with the digital world, and that he very much loved playing these video games and talking with, things that weren't there. And Cody's grandfather just kind of, didn't like his son doing that, because it just kind of seemed like he was a bit crazy or a bit too involved in his own childhood fantasies. And then what ends up happening is one of the bad guy that they have to fight in this time frame, who's in charge of our Kenimon and Mummymon, we meet Yukio Oikawa. And he's, there's a girl whose dark spore is developing faster than the others, and Oikawa goes after her to get the power from her. And in this time frame, Cody shows up, and he's trying to confront Oikawa, and he sees Cody's bag that has Hida on the front of it, and he of course recognizes the last name, and he's like, and he recognizes Cody's grandfather as well. And then he leaves, he runs off, he's like scared, and Cody is very confused, and Oikawa runs off, and Oikawa will get his own video with like Kenimon and Mummymon type thing. And then we cut to kind of the next day or so, and Cody is trying to protect the Cody and the other girl kind of have like an altercation to a degree. And the girl that's has the dark spore inside of her, which kind of, it makes them smarter the same way that the dark spore made Ken smarter into the Digimon Emperor, but it also kind of makes them, easily manipulated, and such. And the dark spore kids will get their own video as well. But what ends up happening is Cody confronts Oikawa, and Cody's grandfather shows up and reveals that Oikawa had been Cody's father's best friend, and that they had, had this fascination with Digimon together, and how even though like Cody's grandfather tried to, not squash it, but tried to, deter them away from it, they still had that fascination. And Cody's grandfather says that he remembers seeing Oikawa at Hiroki's grave multiple times, like on the anniversary of his death. He would see Oikawa there, and he just could never bring himself to go and talk to him and give him a friend, give him someone else that he could talk to about Hiroki. And that kind of results in Oikawa having a bit of an issue at the time. It kind of makes it harder for him to want to fight against Cody. And then in this time frame, Black War Greymon shows up in the real world. He's kind of stopped trying to destroy the Destiny Stones at this point in time, but he ends up finding his way into the real world at this point in time. And he ends up trying to confront Oikawa. And Cody and his grandfather are there, and what ends up happening is Oikawa tries to attack Cody's grandfather. This, the dark presence inside of Oikawa tries to attack Cody and his grandfather. And Black War Greymon defends Cody's grandfather. And this kind of throws Cody off as he sees this. And, Oikawa and Mummymon and Kenimon leave and everything. And this is when Black War Greymon dies. I'll go over that a bit more in his video, but this is when he dies and uses his data to kind of seal up the digital world, seal up one of the gates, so that way Oikawa can't try to get back to the digital world that way. And Cody and his grandfather talk some more, and I think this is when Cody shows his mother Armadilomon. So she now knows about the Digimon, knows that her son is a Digi-destined. During this time frame, I think is when a bunch of the other kids show their Digimon to their parents. I think Davis has revealed to his parents that he has a Digimon, that he has Vmon, and showed it to June. And then I think he also, because the older kids, his parents, they already know. But Ken introduces Wormmon to his parents at one point. And then I think also, I think Yoli does as well, because I know by the time that all of the kids are off in the digital world fighting against Malamyotismon, that like all of their families, all of them, like their brothers or sisters or parents, all of them go to the camp with the older kids that are trying to get back to the digital world to help the younger kids. But what ends up happening is, of course, the younger kids, Davis and his group, including Cody, are there when Oikawa tries to get the Darkspoor children to help take him to the digital world. They end up in the weird dream twisted world, and this is when Oikawa is revealed to have had Myotismon, or the remnants of Myotismon, inside of him, and has been using Oikawa. And he comes out and he forms into Malamyotismon, and he sucks away all of the power from the dark spores inside of the children, and then he digivolves into Malamyotismon, and then he all the Digi-destined are like paralyzed with fear, including Cody. And what ends up happening is, this is when Malamyotismon uses his illusion powers. And for each of the kids, as I said, they end up in their own like dream worlds. TK has his family all together, his parents and his brother all at the same table for dinner and everything. Yoli has all of her desserts and no siblings to have to share with. Kari has her, her world where humans and Digimon are living together peacefully. Ken is in his world of, he gets to have his brother back, which I'll dive into more with Ken's video. And then we have Cody, who ends up in the digital, in his world. He's dreaming of being in the digital world, and he has his father with him, and he's getting to show his father the digital world and Armadilomon and tell him so many stories and everything. And again, it's, for, Cody's dream I understand, TK's dream I understand, Kari's dream I understand. Yoli is the odd one out here. Ken's dream I understand. But they end up, this is when Armadilomon shows up, and he's trying to make Cody realize that this is a dream, this is not real. And then Flamedramon shows up and helps with helping break the illusion and help Cody break free. And then he ends up in Ken's illusion to help get Ken out of his illusion, to show that him and Ken are now friends. And then they all go back into the dream world, the dream dimension, and they fight against Malamyotismon with, the ability to digivolve their Digimon into all of the forms. So he's got Ankylomon there, he's got Samarimon, he's got Digimon, he's got Shakumon to combine with TK's, to combine with that. So we have all of them there fighting, and then they end up getting blasted into the digital world. And they end up getting blasted into the digital world, and then they end up having to deal with Malamyotismon there. The rest of the Digi-destined come from the real world and land in the digital world, and they use their the lights from their Digivices to weaken Malamyotismon, and then that gives the others the ability to destroy him. That gives Imperialdramon Fighter Mode the ability to destroy him. And then what happens is Cody sees Oikawa still in the dream dimension, and he runs back in there, and he tries to drag Oikawa to the edge so he can get him into the digital world, so Oikawa can return to go to the digital world for the first time. He doesn't have Malamyotismon inside of him, but it caused a lot of damage to his body. And Jedi is there, and Jedi explains that the Malamyotismon did so much damage to Oikawa's body that he's not going to last much longer, and Cody just wants to be able to get Oikawa into the digital world so that way he can see him, see the digital world again. And Oikawa makes the comment that all of the digital world looks very rough. And Jedi says, like, well, a lot of power was used up to defeat Malamyotismon. And again, this will go over in Oikawa's video, but Oikawa decides that he is going to use the power from the dream world to turn himself into data, to then be able to change into, turn his digital partners into these butterflies, and says, that he's going to use his power, his remaining life force, to help revitalize the digital world. And it does, and it works, and we have, Cody's there, and he's kind of begging Oikawa, not to give up, and Cody's not, and Oikawa says, like, I wish I had had your optimism. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't have ended up going down this, this same road. And Cody's crying as he watches Oikawa die. The rest of the group are kind of all crying too, or at the very least very sad while they watch Oikawa sacrifice himself. Yes, he was an enemy, but they found out that he wasn't 100% doing it of his own free will, and then he's, sacrificing himself to, help the digital world, to help them to a degree. So we have that happen. And then we cut to the summer of 2003, which is when, of course, they have to deal with Diaboromon. And, that's when the Revenge of Diaboromon, and, like, Ken, or Cody and TK run around trying to gather up a whole bunch of the, Kuramon. And then, Cody and TK, Cody watches the battle against Armageddon and Imperial Dramon Paladin mode. And then he is the one that kind of comes up with the idea of, let's, if we suck all the Kuramon back into our, phones and everything, and then put them in the trash, then we can delete them. And, they do that. And they save the day. Then we cut to 2005, which is, of course, Digimon Adventure Tri. Again, I've been over this for why I don't particularly care for why they do this to the Digidestined, why they did this to the younger kids. Cody, of course, along with Davis and Ken and Yoli, all go and try to fight King Drazel. They get captured, very badly injured. They're in cryostasis for most of the entire specials. And, that series, for the Adventure Tri segment, they're pretty much kept in cryostasis, and we barely hear anything about them, which, of course, as I've stated before, really, really bugs me. And then we cut to, the last episode, Future, I think is what it's called. And, Cody and the rest of the kids are found by Tai and Nishijima, and they're sent back to the real world. And, they go to the hospital. They're taken to the hospital, and they're treated, and they're going to be fine. We don't really get too much else there with the younger kids, which of course still bugs me. But moving on. Then we get Digimon 2020, or Digimon The Last Evolution, depending on how you want to put it. This takes place 5 years after the events of Digimon Tri. And the kids, Cody and Ken are now currently in, I'm pretty sure they're in high school at the moment. I don't remember if they're college age yet or not, but they might be college age. I don't 100% remember, but they're there, and they are, working on that. We see them when Davis and Cody and Ken are having, they get this noodle restaurant in New York, because they use digital world as basically like a free passport and travel. So they travel around in the digital world, and then go to America, or go wherever else they want to go, instead of having to fly there. And, like, they're eating there, and then they end up getting this call from Matt that says, hey, I need your guys' help with this. There's this woman here, her name's Menoa Bellucci. I need you guys to go and do some research for me about her in New York. And they do, and they, go to her office, and at the university or whatever where she works at, and this is when they run into Yoli. And then they end up breaking into her office, and then we have the joke about, like, Armadilomon thinking that, I think it's Armadilomon that thinks that Eosmon is kind of pretty, which, admittedly, I do kind of think that Eosmon is quite pretty, in the instances that we do see it. But they end up, they call Matt back, and they're like, hey, this isn't the information that we found about her. and her bodyguard and everything. This is everything that we found. We didn't really find too much else. They're calling from a payphone, which I just find hilarious. And and they work their way through that. And then during the time frame when Matt and Ty and the other Digidestin are in kind of the crystalline version of the digital world that Manoa has created for the others to each have their own little world and everything, and trying to get them to stay in their childhood, preserve their memories, and kind of trap them in them. This is when Cody and the rest of them are kind of fighting against all of the Eosmon clones that are running around and trying to capture the other Digidestin from around the world and everything. And I apologize if you hear a beeping in the background. It's my mom's alarm going off. And so they end up, they're trying to protect the other Digidestin that are, getting attacked and targeted by Eosmon. And it ends up, they find them, they protect them. They are able to, help fight them off and everything. And then, of course, Ty and Matt, of course, defeat Manoa and help her. And then, Cody and the rest of the, Cody and Davis and Ken and Yoli are, they're like, okay, everything's safe and better now. And then, Yoli goes back to her traveling abroad for studying, and Davis is still working on his, working on noodle stuff to become trying to open his noodle cart, of course. And then we have Ken and Cody are still in, I don't remember if they're in college at this point in time or if they're still like in high school or something like that. But the two of them are studying because, of course, Ken becomes a detective, which I'll go over in his video. But for Cody, of course, by the end of the series, ends up becoming a lawyer. By 2027, we cut to the future and we have him there, and he has become a lawyer. He's, a very successful lawyer, and they make the joke about, Armadilomon keeps sitting on his briefcases and crushing them. And Cody has a daughter that they like to talk in legal terms, apparently. And she has a Upamon, the same way that he did. We don't really see too much else with that in regards to her. She became a lawyer. We have no idea who Cody married. There's not really anyone throughout the course of the series that we see Cody have any form of an interest in. But, maybe he met the girl while he was at college, or while he was, studying to become a lawyer, or maybe they had like one of Cody's first cases where like he had to work with her or he had to argue against her or something. I don't know. But they're, Cody had a kid, got married, has a kid. Not really too much else we see there about Cody's future. Then, of course, we get into Cody's relationships, his family. He, of course, has his mother. Fumiko is his mother. Hiroki was his father, is deceased, unfortunately, of course, as I said. And Chikara Hida is his grandfather. Cody very much adored his father. Cody was still quite young, unfortunately, when his father died, but he still has some memories of him. And of course, at times when we see Cody in his family's apartment, we see like the shrine for Cody's father with like the picture and the candles and everything, which I think that's always a nice thing that they have there. They're not there anymore, but they're not forgotten by the family. I've seen those a lot of the times in a different anime. And I think that they're quite nice for that remembrance thing that they there. We learn about, for Cody's father, we of course had learned that he had been childhood best friends with Yukio Okawa, or Oikawa, sorry. And they'll get talked about a little bit more. Hiroki will get talked a bit more about in the Oikawa video. But, we learned about them a little bit more and how they dreamed of going to the digital world together, but unfortunately that didn't happen. We don't really get too much beyond the fact that his father died in 1999. And, they had, been traveling back to get his ashes, or get his remains from London and bringing it back to Japan. Cody's mother, very supportive of him, has a very good relationship with her father-in-law. And, you know, we don't really get too much about her. We see her when all the families are at the camp with the other kids, families. Um, and she seemed to have been, you know, wants to be supportive of Cody, of course. Same thing with Cody's grandfather. Again, we learn about his past. He had been a bit more on the strict side, and he's a retired police officer and a kendo teacher. So he's Cody's kendo teacher, um, and he's also the kendo teaches kendo at the Odaiba's local police precinct. Um, I have no idea if that's a required course for police officers, but okay. I will trust the Digimon people over that because I don't know. Um, but of course, you know, Cody's grandfather loved his son very, very much, loved Hiroki very, very much, and was very much heartbroken when Hiroki died. But probably could have done better in trying to make sure that Obikawa was not left alone, because if Obikawa had been allowed to still have like a connection with Cody's family, with Cody and his with Cody and with his mother and with his grandfather, and they could all remember Hiroki together, so he wasn't on his own. Then maybe, you know, maybe Mayotasmon wouldn't have been able to get inside of, you know, well, because I'll go over that a little bit more in the Oikawa video, I guess. But there's things that could have been done better in regards to Cody's grandfather in his relationship with Oikawa. Cody's grandfather is very encouraging of Cody, gives him lots of good advice. His grandfather also very much likes prune juice, which is funny. Um, and, you know, he has his future daughter, Digidestined. You know, Cody and Davis have a lot of arguments that they get into, but they still have a very stable friendship. At one point, when Kari is making the statement about the fact of, well, you know, all of our Digimon could, you know, what if we got, you know, Vmon and Armadilomon, like, what if they digivolve together, DNA digivolve? And Cody just has this horrified face. Davis is just like, you think my Digimon's not good enough to DNA digivolve with yours? And Cody's just like, no, that's not what I meant. I just think we need to have a better idea about how this works. Which is just funny. You know, Cody can be sarcastic at times, but it's not his overbearing feature. You know, Davis will listen to Cody a little bit more than he'll listen to like Yoli and TK when it comes to certain things, just because of the fact that Cody isn't just like degrading Davis the entire time. And during the episode when they have to deal with Deputy Mon in when they're trying to find Beelmon at one point in the digital world, they end up in like the old West Town. Davis and Davis and Cody end up getting left in the cell on their own, and they're just like, "This is not fair. This is so not fair." Which is just funny. So they probably bonded a bit over that. Like, I hate the Deputy Mon. I hate him too. Yuli and Cody live in the same building. They're friends even before we're introduced to them. Kari and Cody get along quite well. There's not really too much that we see there with them beyond the fact of, yeah, they're friends. TK and Cody are, of course, DNA digivolving partners to get Shikumon. Ken and Cody, of course, we see the most animosity there between Cody and Ken, because Cody is, of course, the one out of the younger Digidestined that takes the longest to forgive Ken, and eventually does accept him as part of the group just because they need him, and then eventually they do reconcile and become actual friends. And, you know, in the end, much better for them. Cody forgave Ken, and they work much better together. Cody and Izzy, very good relationship. They talk about the digital world all the time. You know, Cody has the Digi-Egg of knowledge, so they talk about those things all the time. Same thing with Joe and, you know, Cody and reliability. I'm sure the three of them would have very interesting conversations. Throw in Ken, and they can unlock all the secrets of the digital world. Um, um, in regards to that, Ty and Cody, they get along fine. Same thing with Matt and Cody. Matt and Cody, of course, had the conversation about why TK has all of these problems with, evil Digimon with darkness and everything. So we get some very good conversations there with them. And then we, of course, have Cody and Sora. Again, there's not really too much there that we get with Cody and Sora. Same thing with Cody and Yoli. They all get along fine. They see each other as, vital members of the team and everything. Cody, of course, will very much take advice from any of the older Digidestined because they know what they've been through. They kind of know what the younger kids are going through. And it's just kind of, eventually they do get, all of the Digidestined all get along with each other for the most part. I mean, yeah, they'll still have their spats and everything. And I'm sure at some points, like, Cody still probably makes jibes at Ken about something, or Ken makes a jibe at Cody every now and then about different things in regards to, okay, well, you remember that time when yes, I know, we can stop bringing it up now, please. That would be my answer to that. It's like if I was in that situation. But we have that. There's not really too much else to talk about with Cody. The next episode for the Digimon characters discussion video will be Ken. And then I think I will do Willis after that. And then it might be some of the miscellaneous Digidestined that they interact with throughout the time frame. I might be giving Michael his own video, Mimi's friend Michael his own video, just because we know a fair amount about him, or know some bits about him. But then the rest of all the miscellaneous Digidestined will be like in their own video. And then, of course, I'm still working on the other the Digidestined friend Digimon videos, and I've got like a couple, like 2 or 3 other for like the villain Digimon, because I want to do one about Arukenimon and Mummymon, and then one about Malamyotismon. And then, we'll see what else I have to work with that for those ones. By the time I get done with all of the Digidestined discussion videos for these things, I'm also probably going to be working on, because I've got a few other One Piece videos I want to talk about, and I've got some other My Hero videos that I want to do, because I've got a couple of other of those series going, plus I've got like the miscellaneous Pokemon videos that I'm working on with, I bred them based on these things. And to anyone that's been watching those, thank you. Let me know if you use anything from those notes. But yeah, so I'm still working on those. Still got the Disney ones coming up, but so I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. People will rely on you only to the extent that you rely on yourself.